Sorry, that was a question. Are you guys recording this on YouTube?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well then, while it's on YouTube, I want to make sure I say and give credit for these slides in this slide presentation, which was put together by Steve Stoudemire of the Hill Country Archeological Association. He's been working out there with a whole team of folks with HCIA for many years now. And so this is all building on the back of their work and his effort in putting together this research for us. So I'll go ahead and get us started. Yes, this is the rich multi-component site that'll be the subject of the 2021 field school for the TAS. And here's its location. And by the way, Eric, pitch in anytime you want to. But I'll just go ahead and, introduce this area. Everybody knows where Kerrville is, and that's where we'll be on a beautiful area on a terrace of the Guadalupe, as you'll see. Our landowner, Marvin, says that when confidentiality is compromised, there's sometimes a backup plan. And if not, here we go. No trespassing. He's got firearms in the back. Watch out, folks. So here we go. Yeah, Eric, if you want to talk about the complex itself, it's actually a complex of 3 archaeological sites on this terrace.
It's a sort of an interesting sort of terrace at the area furthest away from the river. It's much shallower, and we think that's the source of the limestone outcropping. There's a big hill where Marvin was going to build his house, and that seems to be a major source for. There's an inordinate amount of midden and sort of hearth manufacture or construction at this location. And when you get out there, you can see why. It's a beautiful flat terrace, and these have been plowed over a little bit, but there's a bunch of fairly sort of, these big middens. Some of them are 30 meters, 40 meters across. And in some cases, they haven't been used that many times. And so these are not these giant accumulations that you might see at places like Galt, that there is a probably 6,000 or 7,000 years worth of hearth and an earth oven use at this location. And one of these, the attraction seems to be the sort of ready source of limestone from the nearby hill. And again, what's also interesting about it is you have a sort of a wide range of especially archaic projectile points that come from both Central Texas, South Texas, and sort of east. And this seems to be some sort of, as we found at many of these hill country sites, people come from all over to visit the hill country as they do today. So it's almost like it's a meeting place. And that's what's kind of intriguing about it, in that there seems to be a lot of these oven construction going on. And there's a bunch of other activities we think that are kind of missing from this location that occurs at some of these other sites. Once you see this wealth of projectile points, that's usually an indicator that and the diversity of them, that just means there's a lot of use at this site, but it also means that a lot of different peoples were coming to this location almost continuously through the Archaic. And in some cases, we're hoping that we have these individual, what we're always looking for in archaeology, of course, is these sort of snapshot pictures of daily activity. And in some cases, I think we have a better picture at this site than we have at the nearby site, the Gatlin site, which in many cases is more compressed. But one thing that I think everybody's going to like about this site is that, I mean, who doesn't like to find goodies? I mean, frankly, this is it's a rich site, and it's going to test a bunch of skills. It's, there'll be a lot of mapping and a lot of sort of careful excavation of it. And the components that we're looking at are readily accessible, very close to the surface. And we have Marvin's backhoe to get us down to deeper components if that need arises. And so it's very accessible. And this is a picture here of the Gatlin site. I must say, I didn't work in the field on the Gatlin site. I was brought in to put the report together, and I looked at, I don't know, 2,000 bifaces and all the other things from it and all the projectile points, along with, I came in after Doctors Hester and Schaefer had looked at a bunch of it. So my task in that case was, just filling in some gaps here and there that they didn't get around to. But this is a site where you have occupations going back about 7,500 years or so, and there's probably older components of it. And so, as Steve did a great job on this presentation. That this was Steve's salesmanship. Part of it was his salesmanship job to get us to, intrigue in the site. And again, his comparisons are, they're spot on, really. And in highlighting the differences is important as well, because we don't want to just go out and do the exact same thing all over again. And, you can see why this really intrigued Tom Hester at the time, is that these are a lot of the time, these are sort of points that he's looked at in South Texas for 50 years, and this had an incredibly rich assemblage. And one thing about this location is the chert is stunning. There's loads of chert in the hills and then in the river themselves, in the Guadalupe river banks are just have massive amounts of chert. Excuse the dog barking in the back there. And so you can see these, over 400 dart points down, and hundreds of thousands. There's more stuff that we, overwhelmed when we curated this stuff. I mean, this was a massive collection at the time. And of course, you got to remember too, when we're excavating these sites, these are kind of, it's a small sample of sites. So that's probably 5% or so, 5 to 10% of the true area of the site. And I'll put it this was about 4 years of write-up. I think 3 to 4 years of write-up and analysis to get us all together. There were things like the guy that did all the total station work left an encrypted hard drive and disappeared. And so we had to recreate a bunch of things. But we brought in a lot of specialists. A lot of people looked at the various materials. Hold on one sec. Oh, sorry. But it's the snow. The dogs are crazy for it at the moment. But yeah, and so one thing I'm hoping that will have sort of better luck in preservation, which, we did get some fine screen samples, but there should be, we're hoping we're going to find more that comes out of these burned rock features. I mean, we're hoping we're going to get things like lechigia or camas or whatever else they're cooking in these features. I think as before, we really just got a lot of hardwood, but so that's hoping that if Leslie really wants to look at all that stuff, that we're going to have more than a few bags of material to look at. And we did get a historic marker. This was a big accomplishment for the site. It always has this is older than the pyramids of Egypt, and that's a pretty interesting sort of time marker for people. That there were fairly complex societies at the same time occurring in the New World here and in the Hill Country, and that was sort of a testament to the Hill Country Archaeological Association doing that themselves. They felt it was important. And Steve used the hill country, used that site to stop more road development from destroying another archaeological site. He showed the county commissioners how much it would cost them to excavate the site, and they choked and put the road somewhere else. So archaeology did, I don't know how I feel since I'm all for roads being built, but he did a great job on that. And this is the aerial, as you can see, these, it's, in retrospect, this is probably one big site, or however you want to divide these big giant sites up. I mean, you can demarcate them several different ways, but back where it says lithic scatter, that's where it's really shallow and the material's either shallow buried or on the surface. And that's where a lot of the limestone's coming from. And then as you get closer to the river, where you see the main part of the site, 744, that's where the sediments get much deeper and they go down. They're probably 12 or 15 feet, almost 5 meters, I think, as you get closer to the river. There, okay, there's that. You know, Steve is a geologist. Steve Stoudemire is a geologist, so you get these excellent schematics. And you know, Charles Frederick was out there, I think, several times on it. So, and Arlo McKee at the THC was also out there. So it's had a good look over, preliminary sort of look over from people that are knowledgeable about this area. And so that's what's kind of intriguing about it. You can see it's like late Pleistocene, mid Holocene, which is always gets us excited because we're, you know, we're obsessed with Paleo Indians. Huh? I'm sort of, but so that's what's kind of interesting about it, and the early archaeology. And this is a sort of overview of some of their test excavations you have there. That's the hill in the background where they're sort of, that's where we think the source of the limestone is. But you can see the access that we have at the site. And interestingly, this site lends itself very well to social distancing. If that's still going to be the rule or in vogue while we're out there, God knows what else could happen to us. You know, we will have space to operate. And the one thing about it too, as opposed to some of the other schools, just the physical access is easy. And that if there's people with, you know, we're not having to climb anything. So, and we can sort of approach from all different sides on it. So it's an excellent site in that regard. And so I think it's a good choice for this level of excavation. And I think at this point, what we are going to target is we're going to target some of these shallower deposits. And so we'll be able to either pre-scrape or very easily shovel scrape down and directly come down on some of these deposits that are, you know, 4,000 years old right away. So that should, you know, I participate in previous field schools where, you know, we've dug and no one's really found anything. So, which is all good for science, but it's not particularly fun for a lot of other people. And so this is, you know, Steve's, this is excellent sort of graph of the diagnostic, you know, where I'm a lithicist and I'm obsessed with typology too. So I think, you know, this is, you can quibble about the dates, but not so much because, you know, frankly, there's still not a lot of dates, but these are some stunning pictures, you know, of the range of material that we can hope to find. I would say, you know, late archaic, but that's, you know, they're talking hundreds of projectile points coming out of these. And so when Tiffany and I were out there, Marvin had just cut a trench in on a new midden, or one that they had an anomaly on. And what was that, 30 meters across or so, 40 meters across?
Actually, almost exactly 30.
Yeah. And so those are the kind of the areas that we're going to be targeting. And so we'll have the ability to put discrete blocks around the periphery and through some of these middens. And so if you want me to talk a bit more about what our approach is going to be at this point, what we're going to investigate some of the inner structures of some of these middens and see how many times, get an idea of how many times they're used. What was the focus of these types of hearth fields? And you can see here's a typical, well, it's a fair size, but it's probably, that's a single use or a single event type of a feature. So multiply that by 30 or 40 of those things, and then you start seeing these sort of incipient middens. And what we're kind of interested in, as always are, is how long did this formation process take? Are we looking at 30 years, 50 years? We can say a site's been used or visited 30 or 40 times. Well, is that 30 or 40 times over the course of a century, or 30 or 40 times over the course of 5,000 years? As you can see, there's a big cultural difference between those issues like that. And so that's one thing. They're unusual too in that they have an excellent radiocarbon date. And that's a interesting date from what's a bandy, which is a sort of a diminutive sort of Martindale point, which would be more of a southern point. So they have provided that charcoal's associated with it. And that seems to be the few dates we have for bandy and Martindale, that seems to fit right in there. That's probably one of the better dated components. So we're going to try and get some more radiocarbon dates from this. I have a cheap source of accurate radiocarbon dating. So I'm going to say just of, legitimate radiocarbon AMS dating. So we should be able to get some decent dates for, not a giant expenditure of money from this. And we should be able to sort of turbocharge. I think one thing we're going to do is we're going to keep the same field procedures that the Hill Country have been using to excavate the site. We're going to use their forms, their lot system. It seems like we don't want to change around too much. I know in years past, we've had some overly complicated level forms with, 65 things to fill in. This is pretty straightforward, and you'll all have a copy in the manual that'll have a pre-copy of the form that's used, but it should be nothing different really than what you all use on your excavations.
Hey, Eric, well, I want to poke in real quick here and point out, if you can see my cursor, this is the lab too. I wanted to make sure we spatially the location of it compared to the rest of the site. So this is a ranch house that's been on the property for a long time. I don't know if it's 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s ranch house, but it has a very large couple of oak trees out front that produce a lot of shade, and the Hill Country Archeological Association has been having their lab, all of their lab processing in that structure, because they continue to work in the area, maybe not at they still use it as their lab and have been.
Let's unplug my computer. The one in the house.
Amy, you want to put it on mute?
Do I need to unplug the computer?
Anyways, this structure,
Okay.
I mean, sorry, they've been spilling out onto that yard and having their lab space on folding tables out in the shady areas there. Well, not so shady during the winter, but it will need the shade this summer. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'll keep going.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So Marvin's the original farmhouse or old farmhouse on this tract, is sort of a curation facility and lab facility, and it's got a brass rail bar in it. I mean, it's pretty mahogany bar. That's pretty trippy. So it's a pretty deluxe sort of assemblage. And Tiffany's right to bring that up. The Hill Country, they've sort of put all their investigations here on pause and have shifted to some smaller sites over the past couple of years. They have their own sort of projects that they've sort of shifted while sort of anticipating the field school. And so the field school and the work that we're going to do is an addendum really to the work that they've already had. So we're going to use their same nomenclature. You know, I'm not, you know, they're the ones that devised the grid system and everything like that on it. So it's all quite, you know, thoughtfully laid out. It's you know, it's more than a professional operation. They've been excellent stewards for this. Marvin, the landowner, has been great with this. And like I said, having a land
backhoe.
Oh yeah, he just goes nuts. I mean, he's got his own, he actually hand digs like a backhoe. I mean, I've seen some of his hand dug trenches and you're like, you're kidding. And he just, he has an inexhaustible sort of energy supply. And so he's, he leaves the details like this to, you know, people with pencils. And he kind of, he's very hands-on like that. But it's a massive site. And so, you know, you figure we'll be there for a week. We're going to add, you know, a couple hundred levels of excavation to the data that they've already had. And so we're going to basically, you know, make a guest appearance and hopefully get a bunch of data to sort of round out what we think is occurring at the site. Or conversely, we'll find out something, you know, we've just had a weird sample and something completely different is going on here. So that's always a possibility. But you can see just a few hundred meters away, there are some big differences, and it can't all be put down to differences in preservation between the two locations. But they are sort of uncanny, and they're sort of, you know, they're probably occupied at the same time or very similar. And this is not unusual, I think, on these river valleys when you have these nice terraces. You know, as an aside, you know, I was working in San Antonio for years on the lower San Antonio River on the Riverwalk. And traditional theories everybody had was that whole area was abandoned during the Middle Archaic. And nobody was living there at 5,000 years ago. Well, I know Tiffany was out there and had done some work out there when she was at Geomarine, and they had excavated a site out there. Well, when we were down, when I was working for the university for Carr, we stripped probably 2.5 miles of the riverbanks. And what we found was continuous occupations, probably spaced out, you know, there maybe is a 100 or 200 meter gap between them. And we had just never done anything on that scale. We couldn't afford it. And so the same thing, and again, Tiffany was up there too, on the Trinity River in Fort Worth. You find these little isolated sites every once in a while when you work there, and you go, wow, there were just these little pockets of people. Well, when you go in, you know, in the Corps of Engineers or somebody strips these areas, you just find these massive continuous sort of occupations that go up and down these rivers. So same thing is probably happening in the hill country. It's just easier for us to see it in these locations. But it gives us I think changes our idea of where people were living, how they moved about on the landscape. And so those are sort of bigger pictures that we're going to be collecting data to look into, because one thing, you know, we're always in a way leery about on some of these sites is when you do find so much material, you just think, am I finding 6,000 years worth of human activity occurring in a 10 centimeters worth of sediment? And I can't tell what somebody was doing. You can't figure out what people were actually doing. You just get a general idea that, hey, some people were hunting and some people made some things, which honestly is about 90% of the conclusions we come to. I mean, I don't think I'm sort of shocking anybody with, you know, sometimes we have pretty lame conclusions that, you know, but sometimes that's all the data can tell you. And so we're hoping to get, you know, a little more in depth and a little more, you know, Clan of the Cave Bearish kind of, you know, make some hopefully not too outrageous statements, but something more along, you know, beyond, hey, people camped here in ate some mussels or something like that, because honestly, that's usually what we end up with. But here's these are, ground penetrating radar. Is this ground penetrating radar, Tiffany?
No, this is
Or
the,
oh, okay.
and oh yeah, this is partially the result of I guess it was drone flyovers, and
Oh, is this Arlo's stuff, or
it was Arlo's work, and then also the result of a really refined shovel testing
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
coring effort that they did. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
So I'm gonna, yeah, there you go. There's the backhoe trench through that largest midden that they had. There's it in profile. And that's about the thickest we've seen out there, right, Eric?
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We're
So
not
they're
talking about deep, we're not talking about removing a ton of overburden to access these things. When Eric talks about accessibility, it's very accessible.
as someone that just shoveled snow for the first time in 30 years, I feel the same way about shoveling overburden off of things, as I get more advanced in age, my it's not one of my favorite activities sometimes. And so this is actually an excellent, like I said, it is highly accessible. And, and it's true that we've probably have some, material that's been sort of redeposited or smeared around through, 120 years of farming out there. But
yeah, there are a couple terraces.
there is, there's some berms, I think, constructed from archaeological material. But, we should be able to discern that pretty well. And I think part of our idea that, we don't know yet, are we going to have 50 people, 150 or 400 people out there? We should be able to, in talking with the Hill Country and Marvin, we should be able to pretty quickly scale proportionally what type of excavations we want to do, and sort of with the same question. So we're pretty flexible in the way the site is laid out to have, 3 excavation blocks or 13 excavation blocks, depending on how many people are interested in coming out. And so I think, and more like Steve's, talked way more to some other people, like at Texas. He sort of got Steve Black's students involved from Texas State to look at these, the ideas of, as you can see, some of the repeated use of some of these middens, 2000, all right, plus or minus 870 though. Okay, that's a giant error bar, but but it still leads you to think that at least 1,000 episodes of cooking at some of these features. And that in itself tells you that there's a bunch, people were using these locations over and over again, and that there's something in the archaeological record, of course, that we can't, there's, I'm sure, something spiritual and symbolic about these locations, that they operate, that they're part of some sort of landscape right now that we can't, we can't really access with the type of information that we collect. We don't have, we lack the rock art and a bunch of other types of things like that to sort of, look deeply into sort of psyche without any sort of artwork or various other things. We're left with a bunch of rocks. And so Marvin has found a bunch of, he bought another property that had some pretty astounding archaeology on it. And so he and his son are mapping that out right now. So that may be something in the future. It's hard to say. But he's been a sort of a great source of, and a great steward, really. He recognized the importance of this project and this property. And in fact, we've probably slowed down his house construction by about 10 years on the property. Once he was, and him talking to people like Mike Collins really changed his whole idea of what he was originally going to do with it. He was originally kind of thinking of, filling up pails worth of points, and gluing them on boards. And he sort of had a revelation and saw it was much more than that. And so he's sort of thrown himself sort of headlong into assisting archaeology around the state. So it's encouraging and refreshing to have a landowner like him and somebody that's in charge of this location and is generous with the property and everything else. And so that's a big help. And he knows a lot.
Yeah, I agree. All right, I'm gonna flip over and start chatting about some of the logistics of field school for anybody who is going to be joining us out there or who's interested, curious about where we'll be camping. This is about, God, I forgot how far. This is about 8 miles away, basically on the other side of Kerrville. So this is just on the southeast side of Kerrville. From the site, which is on the northwest side of Kerrville. And this is our campground. So this right here is the Hill Country Youth Event Center. This is basically the a rodeo arena grounds. And this is River Star Park. So if you ever hear us refer to it that way, this is the River Star Arts and Event Park. There's a large pavilion here. The cook's trailer will be set up over here, and this pavilion offers shade, it offers Wi-Fi, it offers a stage and lights for our evening programs. And so I think this year, given the COVID situation, we really don't know where exactly we're going to be in June. We are planning on, for folks that are not able to come to TAS Field School, to, for the first time ever, be able to record or at least host on Zoom some of our evening programs this year. That'll be great for folks that maybe, decide from their own personal aspect that coming to field school is just not a possibility or feasible for them at all. And then, so this is offered as a camping area. And so will a good chunk of this park as well, which is actually has the water frontage. This is Flat Rock Park, and there's a gate between the two of them. So this is way more space than really we've ever had for a TAS Field School camp area. So we're going to figure out how we're going to define that while we're out there, and how the county would like us to define the areas that we're using. That is of the Flat Rock Park. We've got definitely this whole area and probably most of this park as well. But it certainly also gives us a huge chance to separate out so that families can camp a little bit distance from each other if necessary at that point in our year. And so off to the northwest here is where all of the restaurants and other lodging options will be, but as always, the cooks will be offering tasty meals every morning and evening here in camp. And we'll be having, we can dine here and have our evening programs here as well as our Sunday board meeting during the field school as well for TAS. Jenny McWilliams will be offering a cemetery workshop. Jenny McWilliams and Carlin will be offering a cemetery workshop during field school on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The TAS registration form, which is now open online, as well as available as a printable PDF, has a checkbox to indicate your interest in attending the cemetery workshop. And Jenny will assess the number of interested folks and figure out how to schedule you for which day during the field school. So if you sign up for this, basically you'll be leaving your crew for 1 to 3 days during field school and joining the cemetery workshop. And it will be, of course, a limited availability. but should be some really great investigations and hands-on learning opportunities that she's offering there. This is just a photo of Flat Rock Park, I guess not the most scenic photo, but the one available on their website. And this is it on the banks of the Guadalupe River, which is really a lovely, downstream here, there is a lake, so it's dammed up and it's very wide here. And across the way, across the lake is the Shriner County Park. And here's just an example of one of the cemeteries that they're going to be going out and figuring out what the best forms of documentation for a cemetery of this kind. So, you know, if folks encounter a cemetery just that's indicated by no more than maybe one mark or what might be there, how to document it, how to look for it. And Jenny's amazing specialty also involves what plants to look for that might be indicator species for a cemetery as well. Our other programs will include the evening workshops, teachers workshop, a lab, youth group, Archeolympics every year, and the public program, which we'll also host on Thursday, that will let the local community know what it is that we interlopers in Kerrville that week have been doing out there, and what the benefit to the regional area is, aside from our economic boost. But Ron, I wanted you to go ahead and speak to, if you would like, the historic component that's out that we'll be investigating.
I'll be glad to do that, Tiffany. Depending on our registration, if we get a lot of folks, and if a lot of those people are interested in the historic aspects of historic archaeology, we may be able to offer the excavation on a local ranch located another 6 or 8 miles off to the southeast of the campground that featured at one time a school, and next door a bar of all things. So those two features are no longer extant. They're just lumps of dirt now above ground. But they look like they would be really interesting historic features. And we have one of the ladies at Hill Country already doing the background research on what happened there. And we may be able to get into those two sites and put in some units and see what was going on. I don't know at this time a whole lot about the features, about the old school, but I can guess that they're probably turn of the century or maybe a little bit earlier. And they're definitely in the countryside, so they were not easily accessible. They weren't like honky tonks downtown at all. And that's about all I can say about that, Tiffany.
Okay, yeah, I think it should be interesting. That's on the Ninehofer Ranch, and Julius Ninehofer is currently still on the Kerr County Historical Commission, and so he's been very involved in not only belonging to one of the historic Kerr County families. He's got a keen interest in history. Oh, and Ron, that's right. In whatever field school was previously in Kerr County, there were archaeological sites recorded on the Ninehofer Ranch during survey. And so we're hoping to also be able to, during our survey component of field school, be able to reassess or revisit some of those archaeological sites.
That is true. And I don't think it was a TAS field school. I think it was maybe a UTSA field school. And the locations are fuzzy along with the details. So yes, if we could go back to some of those sites and record them, that would be a big help to the surrounding definition of the archaeology.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, at this point, I'm wondering are you guys seeing the TAS website on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna look away so I can actually navigate around this screen. So just because this has changed over the years and I need to get familiar with it too, I wanted to do a quick run through of where the information is that we have for the TAS Field School. So if you come up to the TAS Field School activities, this is our main page. This is always going to be the landing page that has just some basic information about what this year's field school is going to be. It will always have links to all these other pages, including the download mail-in registration form, the principal registration form, the online registration form. Information. This 2021 information will always bring you to specific information for this year's field school. And then I want to point out some of these other things that are available here, as well as up here in the activities dropdown. But the general camp information page is going to be super useful to folks. This will have information about how the week goes during field school, what to expect around camp, the fact that there will be portable toilets, whether or not the fact that you're expected to maybe have your own shade in some cases, if it's not going to be a tree shady field school, the fact that no glass containers are allowed, and we'll have like I said, portable toilets and no smoking in buildings, and that we will be selling ice for purchase at the field school. And it also gives a little bit of information about what the typical day is like, when everybody wakes up in the morning, what time breakfast is served, what time dinner is served, when evening programs will begin. So this is all super useful information. Includes the camp rules that we expect all of our campers to adhere to, and recommended equipment for the camp, for your camp area. And then some examples, a little bit about our cooks and some examples of what our breakfasts and dinners typically contain. We get a lot of questions through the TAS website every year about, you know, what does a typical dinner look like? If I'm a vegetarian, are there enough options and that kind of thing? And so the examples that we provide there are fairly accurate to a typical menu. I also want to point out our fieldwork and lab info page. This is the what to expect and what to bring for if you are working on a survey team, a survey crew, a excavation crew, or whether you're working in the lab group. And it gives you a little bit of what to expect here. And then towards the bottom, we've got recommended equipment. Now, of course, not everyone needs every single item here, but this is just a really good sample of some of the things that are recommended that survey crews and lab crews will bring along with them for each of their field days for folks who want to come extra prepared. And then, of course, there is the youth group section. And I want to talk just briefly about the youth group. The youth group is something that we're going to have to really figure out. So this is still a little bit early because we're in the stages of not knowing exactly what field school and what the local and Texas's COVID numbers are going to look like in June. We are assuming right now, we are moving forward with the assumption that all is well. We are planning to move forward and we will reassess as things get closer. But as we I just submitted a newsletter article to the TAS newsletter, which will come out soon. We are going to be having a completely separate release. So for folks who have attended field school before, we normally have an attendance agreement and legal release that everyone has to sign in order to attend field school. This year, we are going to have a completely separate COVID specific form that is likely going to be required at check-in. And this is going to be including things like if if it's still the advised guidance that in areas, in large gatherings and within maybe 6 feet of folks, even if you're outside, that mask wearing will still be required. And if that's what needs to be at the time, then we'll be asking folks to say, I agree to do this. And we agree to keep distance. And we're going to implement potentially such measures as 1 person at a screen at a time and those kinds of things in order to be able to make sure that we're all able to safely have field school. We know everybody wants to get out there and do the archaeology, and we're really looking forward to having the camaraderie that we're used to every summer, and we all really missed it this year. So we want to make sure we're able to get out there and safely do this again and see each other. I think that's just absolutely critical for all of us, for our mental health and happiness. So yeah, I think Ron and Eric, am I missing anything else? Field registration is open.
I think you've covered it.
Okay. Well, happy to, oh gosh, fortunately, I just saw Robin was waiting to enter the room and I left out one critical thing. Oh, I guess I had it on one of the slides. Assuming all is going forward, we're also going to have a teacher's workshop for teaching credit that is offered during field school again this year. And we haven't developed a full slate of afternoon workshops yet. Those types of things are still, it's still somewhat early for field school planning. But as any field school will be, we're going to try to make this as normal as possible. We're going to have a few extra safety measures in place, but we're hoping that when you come to field school, you're going to recognize it as field school. And that's all I got.
All righty. Thank you, Tiffany, Eric, and Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Eric and Ron.
That was actually an excellent presentation. I really didn't expect it in so much detail. So thank you very much. I'm sure people have questions. Does anyone have questions for these guys?
I have a question. You mentioned that tents and pop-ups, can that include RVs as long as they're self-contained?
Yes, I believe so. That's going to be one of the things that we're verifying. They won't be available in that River Star Park, but we're hoping that they will be. In fact, I'm fairly certain that they will be in that Flat Rock Park area that you saw that was adjacent to the river. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Tiffany, what are the chances? We normally try to go at least 2 years in most locations. Are there any plans along those lines?
Yeah, so I mean, COVID introduced an interesting scenario for us to have to cancel a year, because definitely TAS the field school committee prefers to be able to have 2 years if the archaeology and the landowner and the local area merits it, and we're interested in going back, of course. So we're hoping that we have excellent results and that Eric and Marvin are both happy to have us back one more year. So those are the odds, that there may be a second year, but of course things are always up to what we find out, you know, how the field school ends up going. We will always have something waiting in the wings, and just sneaker alert, the next thing waiting in the wings might be in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm. All right. Ken Hedrick asked me if I would ask you a question for him on his behalf, as he would be interested in trying to do something that didn't require a lot of physical effort, that would not be in the lab. So if you can think of something like that, that you could plug him into,
And like sharpening tools, right?
something like that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, we could always use help out, you know, adjacent to a block. There's always a good task to be done.
Okay, I'll tell him he has to just get with you on that then.
Tell him to just come on, sign up for excavation and come on.
Yeah, he normally just hangs around the youth excavation, giving people a hard time. That was his function. Well, nobody has any more questions. Hopefully this gets pulled off. I'm looking forward to it. I know I have a grandson that was bitterly disappointed that we didn't go last year or this past summer, and really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, you know, we'll see how many vaccines, you know, have been gotten, how many of us have made it past that hurdle by then. But even if it's not everybody, it'll be a lot of folks, and with some extra safety precautions in mind, I really don't see any reason why we won't be able to, but we don't know how it goes. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, Tiffany and Ron, we appreciate it very much. Eric, I'm so sorry I mispronounced your last name earlier. And thank you so much for your excellent presentation. And if there's nothing else, I think we'll call it a night.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Nick.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Say goodbye.
Thank you.
Good night.